Is that Dan sleeping?
I just texted him and told him he looks frozen or asleep.
Or is that his picture? Is that his?
That's his screensaver.
I love that. That is the coolest, Dan.
Yeah, Mo,
no, that's just my holding place.
How are we doing? We got one more person on. Yay!
Yeah, we got Tracy on now. We got Dan joined us, and the other Tracy.
Two Tracys.
Yep. And then Carly will be joining us pretty soon here. So we could probably join as soon as we're ready. And you saw my email on Monique Morris, by the way?
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to see it. On who?
Monique Morris actually emailed me and this morning and stated she actually moved to New York and is working with youth in New York City.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So she won't be participating and we'll have to actually bow out of.
All right.
Just FYI, we can talk about
that's good to know. And I'm glad she's still doing this work over there. So this is awesome. All right. Well, everyone, in the interest of time, let's get going. And we have at least half of us on the call, which is great. And then I know that there's going to be at least one more joining us. And so we're pretty excited. So everyone in this group, I think, pretty much knows each other. Do we need to do introductions? Does everyone, and you guys all met Moises at the last meeting? Are we all good? Okay, sounds great. And then the only person that you don't necessarily know, we know we have a lot of the SCC staff, and then the person that you don't know is Carly, who will be joining us a little bit later, and when she comes in, we can do an introduction of her. But in the interest of a time, I just wanted to maybe start by recapping what our purpose is today. And then for the most part, Tim and Moises are going to guide us through this process. And you will be involved in looking at it. So just as a kind of a reminder on the same page, you know, our work today is to develop the scope of work. And the scope of work will be to engage a consultant that will help us in doing some data collection within our state that meets both the federal requirements and any requirements that we as a state agency would like to see in our efforts to reduce ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system. And so Tim has provided a really great like scope of work and guideline for us. Kind of want to go back to just kind of keep us focused on the guidance that we got from the State Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, of which we're under. And that was that they made a recommendation that we hire a consultant or use a subject matter expert to develop a detailed review of each county, including assessment of county interventions that are resulting in the reduction of racial and ethnic disparities and the identification of challenges and barriers that may exist within the county juvenile justice system. The review would analyze the RRI data and other sources of data, as well as county policies, processes, and procedures. The analysis would demonstrate where disparities exist within the juvenile justice system, and the project will highlight projects that are particularly noteworthy and include information about what makes them noteworthy to provide a framework to help counties to develop more effective interventions and replicable strategies. That is our goal, okay? That sets the framework for what we are working on today. And then with that, we recognize that the federal government changed some of their guidelines around reducing ethnic disparities and the data that should be collected and how we should collect the data. So wanting to be in compliance with that doesn't mean that we can't go further, and as our statement from SACJJD is going further than what the federal government is requiring, but making sure that whatever we do is also in compliance with the federal government, because that's part of our Title II and what we need to do. So with that framework, I am going to let Moises and Tim do their job, and then through the process, they will kind of give us prompts and steps of where, you know, of course, your input is critical, and what are the questions that we need to answer so that we can develop this scope of work. And these are just, you know, if you look on the guidelines that Tim provided, this is just a starting point, because there may be other questions or other areas that you want to make sure that are covered that we didn't think about. So don't feel that this is all of it. That why we need you here is to make sure that we do cover the points that are necessary to be able to get to a good scope so that we can hire the best consultant available. Okay, any questions before we jump in? All right, let's jump in. Tim and Moises, take it away.
So couple things first. First of all, the documents that I emailed out to the group, for those who would like to follow along, I am going to screen share the documents here, but I included over in the chat the link to the agenda for the meeting, which includes the attached documents that we will be referring to today. So if you want to follow along and aren't able to or don't have the documents, go ahead and head over to that link and you should be able to pull them up from there. Second is that this meeting is being recorded, so I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that. And the third thing, too, our chief counsel would want us to make sure that we cover conflict of interest again, to make sure that we're all okay. We're looking to ensure that by participating in this group, you realize that your organization or any organization you're affiliated with that could have some sort of a benefit from decisions from this meeting, you would have the opportunity to recuse yourself. If not, understand that the affiliate organization would not be able to participate in the RFP process. So I'm assuming we're all good. If someone would like to recuse themselves from this point, please do it immediately. If I don't hear any, I will continue on moving forward. Seeing no hands raised, we'll continue on. So let me quick share the screen here. Let's see if I can do this without logging myself off here. Okay. I'm hoping you can do that. Are we all able to see that document on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So as Chair Rios has stated, you know, the process today, we're going to go through a little bit of background just to frame up the last portion of this, which will be a series of questions. So there's going to be some informational items here, and then at the end there will be some action items. So we'll work our way through some of the required information, some of the past information. If you have questions along the way, please stop and we'll take them one by one. But the intent here is to actually, in our answering of the questions or any additional questions, just to frame how we're going to develop that scope of work for each of the components. So you'll see as we go along. Okay, so moving forward, taking a look at the core requirements for the SACJJDP, the Title II requires 4 specific requirements. One is the deinstitutionalization of status offenders, and this is important for this process as well, because as we take a look at the data collection measures and moving forward, deinstitutionalization of status offenders will pop up, and you'll see as we move forward. Jail separation and removal and jail removal. Those 3 are actually, we have a compliance monitoring portion of our grant that actually goes to juvenile facilities to do inspections. And then the 4th one is racial and ethnic disparity. I've included the statute here for us so you can understand, because this actually really frames what we're looking to do with this consultant. So let me read this real quick. Pursuant to the JJDPA Act 34 U.S. Code, all the numbers A15, in order to achieve compliance with RED requirements, states and territories must implement policy, practice, and system improvement strategies at the state, territorial, local, and tribal levels as applicable to identify and reduce racial and ethnic disparities among youth who come into contact with the juvenile justice system without establishing or requiring numerical standards or quotas by A, establishing a designated existing coordinating bodies, and that's both our SACJJAB and our RED subcommittee here, composed of juvenile stakeholders, including representatives of the educational system at the state, local, and tribal levels, to advise efforts on states, units of local governments, and tribes. B, which is important to what we're doing here, identify and analyze data on race and ethnicity at decision points in state, local, and tribal justice systems, determine which such points create racial and ethnic disparities among youth who come in contact with the juvenile justice system. And C, developing and implementing a work plan that includes measurable objectives for policy, practice, or other systems based on the needs identified in the data collection and analysis under subparagraph B. So what that is really stating is this. The process they're looking for us to move forward in with our racial and ethnic disparity and state plan is that, one, you have data to analyze. Two, that in your analysis, you're able to identify areas of disparity. And then from there, add implementation. And then the fourth part would be to add a level of review to determine whether what the implemented measure or intervention, whether it was successful. So in this process of what we're looking for from this consultant in this report, we not only want it to be a report that shows us the disparities for decision-making purposes, but we also would like it to be something that we can replicate and pull data on a yearly basis to see if what we've been implementing is successful. Mo, am I clear on that? I know you're deeply involved in this part. Is that a pretty good synopsis? Luis?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, getting that coordinating body and then getting that data to be able to analyze and find where the areas of disparity are, and then make a plan and then evaluate it, of course.
Okay, so carrying on through this, there was a portion, the term racial and ethnic disparity means minority youth populations are involved at a decision point in the juvenile justice system at disproportionately higher rates than non-youth at the decision, than the non-minority youth at the decision point. Just really what we're looking at here is the data collection points. So with the JJRA change in 2018, the data collection points previously, prior to 2018, were at the level of arrest, court referrals, pretrial detention, diversion, petition, delinquency finding, probation placement, secure confinement, and adult court. And I'll show you some examples of that as we go. They actually changed it and reduced it down to 5 reporting measures, but it doesn't mean that we can't go beyond that. And then one other change that they had is a change that went from population, it went from RRI, which is a relative rate index, complicated measure, to population percentage reporting. Again, we could continue with RRI as a review point, but we do need to report our base data that is required under the grant in population percentage. I hope we don't get too hung up on that because of the fact that you can actually get the population percentage from the RRI base data. So either way. So moving forward, here's what this looks like. And I included both metrics here. So you can see what we reported. On the top is the 2017 RRI data that was reported to the feds. Somewhat of a complicated measure. Basically what they do is have a white being the standard at a 1.0, and then there's, I don't want to complicate the math, but some sort of a standard deviation or some measure of a ratio of either arrests or diversions, etc., comparative to white. So in most cases, a higher number than 1.0 shows disparity negatively, except in the case of diversion, which would be the which would be the opposite. You would want it to be a lower number. A lower number would show. So anyway, I don't want to complicate this too much, but that shows you the relative rate index and the number that that we would receive or how we would analyze that. Where it can be difficult is when you submit and have a report that a county would read, you're going to have to do a deep dive in explanation, some sort of a training on how to read these numbers. It's not easy. What does it mean, etc. When it switched over in 2018 to a population percentage, you can see it's potentially we could get the same information as far as disparity is concerned. When you look at the percentage, say here at arrest level, the arrest percentage is quite a bit higher for, say, the Black population than the white or American Indian, et cetera. You can see that ratio, and you can see that disparity exists just the same, and it's a little bit easier to understand. Again, I'm not trying to sway anybody in any direction here other than to say we can get to the population percentage and all of those 9 different data collection points if we choose to, with the data that's currently gathered through the California Department of Justice. But just to give you an idea of the differences. And then,
Tim,
yes.
Tim, this is Dan. Could you, because I'm not familiar with the numbers, could you just tell me what yes and no means?
At the very bottom,
Where it says this group.
well,
At the bottom of that first chart.
The California Department of Justice has a minimum of threshold of 1% of the population, and then the yes or no states whether they meet that 1% threshold of the population. I don't know how it affects the data, other than it's a very low percentage of the population. And in some measures that you'll see statewide, they'll actually group. They'll have white, Black, Hispanic, and then other all together because of the under 1%. So it's not anything that.
The reason, Dan, is if the numbers are way too low, then it's really hard to have confidence in the numbers that actually come out.
So it's just a significance level, basically.
It's just that you don't have enough power to find the effect. Yeah. And that's part of the issue with RI. RI is it's great to interpret, as in say that the juvenile arrest with Black, you could basically say it's over 4 times as likely that a Black youth will be arrested versus white.
Okay.
But the calculations are much more complicated and sometimes harder to explain to a general population.
So Dan, to answer your question, the reason there's a threshold is that if you say have 4 youth and 1 gets arrested, you have a 25% arrest rate, which may not, which may, is that statistically valid? So I think that's why they have the threshold. Did I say that right, Mo?
Thank you.
Yeah. So one thing that this doesn't give us, and I want to include this here, is that we do have subcategories that are quite important here, and it doesn't break down to this level. As we mentioned before, we had status offenses are an issue. So we could break this down even further and have a report that would actually show the disparity that would exist at each of these. And these are penal code definitions for each of these crimes listed. So for status offense, and by crime, it means for youth on a status offense would be some sort of something that would not be crime if they were 18 or older. So truancy being one, curfew, incorrigible, beyond parental control, violation of a court order. We could break this down even further by misdemeanor, theft, drug and alcohol, malicious mischief, drug, property, and violent crime as well. In fact, let me pull up real quick. I'm going to share this as well. Are you able to see this report here? Is it sharing? The Juvenile Justice in California report?
Yes.
Okay. So this one actually does very much, it's a similar report to what we have in that it actually follows the same flow of process from beginning of arrest all the way through court disposition. One of the things that's difficult, and I know we discussed this earlier in the spring with Chair Rios, is that it has the data elements in the base data, but it doesn't give us what we need because it actually compares the populations as one, it keeps them as one block in the percentage. There's no comparative percentage, it's just what is the percentage of total arrests by population. So it doesn't quite give us what we want, but just to show you some of the ways this can be broken down. For arrests, you can look at this, you have felony status, misdemeanor, breaks it down by gender, male, female. You could have juvenile arrest categories by age, and then by, again, we see over here we have by race, which includes white, Hispanic, Black, and then they include all others. It can be broken down even a little bit further than that. Then it gets into felony arrests. Again, when you start getting to minority groups, it lumps them again as percentage of the whole versus percentage within the race comparatively. So this doesn't quite give us the measure we're looking for, but this may be something that you would have in mind, something like this that you would have in mind moving forward. This is one report. I'm not sure all of these would fit or which ones would fit. It would be something that we would have to decide in this process. But I just want to put this one out there just so that you can see an example of what a report of arrests would look like, or something very similar to what we're doing. So that would actually break it down by status, misdemeanor, and felony. So that's there for your review. So within this project, any questions on that to this point before we continue on? I'm sorry, I don't want to make you busy by moving this too much.
Tim,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, Tim, I just wanted to say, for the group, we talked about the different reports, and I think one of the things that we want to look at is that we could have different measures, different ways to look at the data versus just one way. So for example, in the last document that you showed, you're just looking at within a group, which is an important thing to look at. Like if I am a Latinx group, then you can tell me what percentage of my arrests are felonies or not, and so forth, right? But how do I compare to the larger California demographic, right? How do we look at that? And so what I want this group to look at is different ways that we can tell the story of what we need to do, what we need to do. And so some of these are really good reports in terms of the way they show, but they're not necessarily all inclusive. So hoping that you consider that, what are the different things that we need to learn from this data?
Yeah, excellent. So for this group, I
was just going to say real quick, hey, Tim.
Go ahead,
real
Mark.
quick. I just want to make sure that people, when you're starting to think about all those bits of data you want to get, sometimes you get overwhelmed with it. And so I would say be cautious, but at the same time, yes, be innovative, try to think of how else can we see this, while at the same time, be leery, because when you get so much data, sometimes it's overwhelming. So it's got to be useful, and at the same time, get that data that you need. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, excellent. So for this project, moving in, there is a bit of a timeline, so to speak. So right now with our RED plan, what we've submitted for our plan for this year is we actually have our RED plan in two parts. The first part being the integration of RED into our current cohort of 12 grantees that are receiving Title II funding through our recent RFP. They've been operating for a little over 6 months now, actually 7 months now. So those programs are up and running, and there is an RED component, there is an evaluation component, et cetera. That's part one. We're moving along. Part two of our plan is to actually move forward with this this data process, as well as the overall encompassing components of the SACJJDP guidance. do have to report on February 28th on our 3-year plan on where we're at. So we'll talk about the timeline as we go, but I don't want to put this out there as being something that we have to be complete with this entire project by February 28th. We just need to be making progress. And we can talk about what that means when in one of the questions we talk about some of the timeline issues or some of the timeline components that we're going to need to put some dates to. But just want to flag that we will be putting some sort of a report out of our current status with that February 28th application for the 2021 funding. And this happens to be the year where our 3-year plan is due for both the statewide 3-year plan as well as RED and also our compliance monitoring plans, which are components of that. So I don't want to weigh that down too far, other than just to know there will be some reporting as we go. So Chair Rios actually discussed the framework, the recommendation from, that was approved by SACJJB at the November 12th, 2019 meeting. I also want to point out the funding that we have available here at this point. The SACJJB has allocated $300,000 to the RED committee to develop project scope of work and to hire consultant, submit required deliverables, which would then inform the RED state plan, and any additional activities of interest to the committee. And then also of that $500,000 then that was allocated, well, 300 for that portion, 200 is then for local projects to actually implement when we get to the implementation portion of this project. So, and Rachel, I don't know, we do have a budget meeting coming up in with the 2020 funding once we receive our award. I don't know the potential of, at this point, depending on where we're at, of whether the SACJJB would bump that up or not, or just leave it the same. That's a determination yet to be made, but right now this is what we have.
So just along those lines, one of the things for this committee to be thinking about is what do we think we should be putting out in an award amount for this work? Keeping in mind that if all of these resources go to the consultant to do the data, then we won't have resources then to possibly fund some pilot or demonstration projects, So one of the things that, we have to put a dollar amount on this work. And so I just want you to think about it, maybe, as we're working on all of the tasks that we're going to have the consultant do, will define like how much money we put into the contract, of course, But that said, be thinking about whether we feel that this contract is a $500,000 contract or is it a smaller contract, and then some of these monies are going to be put aside for what is that? Some of these monies are going to be put aside for actual demonstration projects, and initially that was some of the conversation that the SACJJB had.
So
this is Tracy Kenny. I have a question, or maybe this is going to come up later, but the directive from the SACJJB, does it really encompass the same level of analysis for each of the 58 counties?
yeah, that is one of the yes, that is one of the asks in this, and that's one of the things we need to discuss. And it will be part of our, the next set of questions. How is that feasible? Is that feasible within this project portion? Is that, what are the different options? We'll discuss that as we get to the questions. But yes, the ask is for an evaluation of all 58 counties. Okay, so getting to the action items, the first thing I want to make sure is that the SACJJB guidance is clear. Are we any questions on what we're looking to do here? We're looking to really frame up some of put some meat to the bone, so to speak, and have a little bit of a framework on the scope of work development. My expectation in this process is that we'll have this discussion. We'll take a series of notes for each question, make a determination of some specific components within each section, and then I'll take that back and I'm going to develop a draft scope of work that will then come back and meet again, and we'll be able to discuss that particular document. That's the expectation going forward. I just want to make sure that we don't have any questions at this point before we move forward. No? Okay. And then also on the data component, I want to make sure we're good with that. Again, we can use RRI, we can use population percentage, we can use any other data metrics. So within the scope of the data portion as we move forward, we could leave it on the table for decisions to be made during the project phase. We could make some decisions now if you would like, or we could just continue and just start getting to the questions. So if I don't have any comments at this point, I'll just move to C1. Looks like we're ready to go.
I mean, I just want to say that I do think that RRI is a useful measure. Everything is relative, as they say, and it gives you a context and a comparison point. And I don't find it that hard to explain, and it then allows you to relate, what people of color's incidents of these activities are relative to white youth, and that is relevant to the work we're doing, I think. And it's fine to collect the other data and to be able to see both of them and try to understand it, but I feel like it's much easier to contextualize the magnitude of the disparity with RRI than a straight population measure. But that's my 2 cents.
I'm writing notes here, Tracy. Okay, any more?
And Tim, just to clarify, we can go and collect RRI, but that's not what the federal government. We also have to collect the data the way the federal government wants us to. So we would have to do both if we choose to, right?
Yeah, and I think there would be, the difference would be, and will be a decision to be made during the process, is, we want to have data that's able to have decisions that we make decisions out of as the SACJJD RED subcommittee making recommendations. But also we want to consider what would be useful for the county's level to make decisions from. When they see their county report, as we get through the project, and if it's RRI, it's RRI. If it's population percentage, we can, even if we just provide RRI or just provide population percent, either way, we have the base data to be able to do our reporting requirements to the feds. We just really need to be aware of what is the best way to display this for decision-making purposes when we get to our final product. Hopefully that's helpful. So let's take a look at the first component of this of the SACJJD, of the recommendation here that was approved. Analyze the RRI data and other sources of data, as well as county policies, processes, and procedures. The analysis will demonstrate where disparity exists within the juvenile justice system. There's actually a couple parts of this to consider. The first being the data itself demonstrating disparities, but then also it talks about county policies, processes, and procedures. It's really a two-part ask here. And I'm not sure they're the same. What does the group think about this?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, especially about getting to each and every county. Like, I can see that you would do the data analysis first for all 58 counties on all the available measures. And then the question is, like, do you do 58 sets of inquiries about policies and procedures and assessments of existing interventions and challenges and barriers, or do you select a sample of counties based on the data, some that look like they have lower rates of disparities and some that have higher, to try to unpack some of these issues? Because I don't know, I just don't understand. It's so hard to not have the experts who have to be conflicted out of this, whether the 300,000 is enough to do this comprehensively. Because I don't think you can just like go on someone's website and find their county policy, process, and procedure in a meaningful way to do an analysis, even of this number one, let alone getting into all their interventions and stuff. So I guess that's why I was asking earlier whether we think it's realistic. I think, of course, you do the data analysis for every county, but is it realistic to do everything else for every county?
Tracy?
Hey, can I jump in? Sorry. I am just joining. I'm a little late. I'm Carly Durkheising. I am on the SACJJDP, but I feel like I can answer your question because I did help develop this ask, if you will. And you're right on. We wouldn't like really the goal is about who's doing this well and how can we learn from them, right? So it wouldn't be diving into interventions and policies and procedures in all of the counties. Like it would be developing some type of methodology about how you would identify perhaps who's not doing well, but definitely who is also doing well, and what does that look like and how do we learn from them. And Rachel can correct me if I'm a little bit off, but I think that was the ultimate intent from the SACJJDP.
Yes, thank you, Carly, and welcome. I'm glad you joined us. Yes, that is, but also I wanted to let the team know that a lot of just the numbers, that already exists. And I think even some of our members of our RED said that they already have on their databases this information in terms of some of this numbers. So that isn't the heavy lift. The heavy lift is the work that you were talking about to see where county policies, that's what we really need someone to tell us. Where are there things that are not connecting, right? But I mean, the data is there. We need someone to analyze it, right? But the numbers are there. And so this would go a little bit into it, not to the deep level that Carly just explained, you know, that you're going to analyze every single person, county's program, but we need more than just the numbers. That part is already there. We need something more that tells us the story behind every county. And then we pull out those, you know, great stories or other areas. And that's where I think that's why there's a significant amount of resources allocated to this project, because that work is going to take time. You know, just to do the numbers would not warrant a $300,000 contract. So this has to be some of that work that's going to go in and find and interview counties and find out what's going on. I hope that makes sense, you know, to folks.
Well, one other potential option, you know, I'll just kind of put it out there as an example of what could be done, would be to have the data that actually demonstrates where the disparity exists, and then through the demonstration grant portion of the funds, use the data to choose a number of counties to see, and if they're willing, then use that funding to actually do that deeper dive at the county policy level. And Carla, I listened into your session yesterday. That was a heck of a dive yesterday. I'm not sure we would be able to have a consultant go that far down. And for the group, they were actually taking a look at in comparative. Comparing a couple of counties, Ventura and LA County, regarding each of the data collection points, from arrest to probation to, you know, they actually were analyzing and looking at potential gaps. I would assume that's what we're looking to have happen, and it may take a specific subrecipient type of a project to get to the level that you're looking for. I'm not, those here that have consulting experience, I'm not sure a consultant would be able to get to that level in the time we're thinking. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, you know, this is a good question for the group. So if we want them to just give us the data and the numbers and some general analysis, and then a secondary contract to look at something further, then that we would have to write it that way. But $300,000 just to give us numbers is not a wise utilization of resources. We can't just do that. So we would have to write the scope in, you know, this is the deliverable. You would do A, and then you would do B, you know, and so we would have to write it in that manner to do that. And then, you know, again, you know, we hope that there's more additional resources to really pilot, to actually fund some of those, like using the best practices that are identified, you know, to be able to maybe fund a couple of demonstration projects in the next round, using the principles or, you know, what we've been identified. You know, I mean, that might be a third step.
Just to add on to that, I would, you know, I think Rachel, you're right on it. I'm guessing, I don't know a lot of the folks here, but I'm guessing everyone would agree. We recognize disparities exist. We don't need to continue highlighting the numbers, but I think we need to use the numbers to guide then the next step. So if the, you know, the quantitative piece would identify potentially the counties or maybe even jurisdictions that are doing a good job, like I said, and some that maybe are in the middle and maybe some that are like, you know, not doing well. And that would just be kind of the first phase, if you will. And then you would dive in and work with those counties to learn about what is actually going on at the practice and policy level that's driving the numbers. So really it's about putting more context around the numbers than continuing to, you know, highlight the disparities.
That's great, Carly.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yes, often because y'all have a lot of data in your state, that shouldn't be a very hard thing to do. I think everybody's agreeing with that, bringing in the numbers, and that's usually the way. You look at the numbers, gives you guidance, select a few places, look at what part of the process, what's going on in the good and the bad, and then hopefully be able to have some money, for some demonstration. So I think everybody's kind of in the same consensus that sounds appropriate. And as a consultant looking into that, I would need to know, okay, are you saying this much money for exactly what are the expectations for this? So you know, as Rios is saying, be explicit so that consultant knows what exactly you're asking for.
So that makes a lot of sense in terms of as we're identifying the deliverables, if we say up to so much is going to be spent for this, or, you know, I mean, you don't really want to tell your consultant where they use the money, but we need to outline saying this is a deliverable and this is a deliverable. So that way they know they have to do both of these things and they can't put all their money in this one piece because they still have to deliver this other piece too. And I guess as we go, Tim, you can guide us where we need to put those steps to make sure they happen.
So where my mind is at, and you know, you guys can weigh in on this, is regarding the deliverable component is, you know, we know we need a data report. You know, as Carly mentioned, that's deliverable 1. Deliverable 2 is an analysis of what is driving the numbers at the county level. Where my mind is at is determining how to put this on paper to get something back that we are looking to get from somebody who's submitting a proposal to do this work. How do we write this out? So framing the data collection in a contract, how would we look at framing that phase 1 data collection approach? Development of a report in consultation with the subcommittee, something along those lines to, yeah, I don't know, help me out here.
Well, in the number, you have 6 points here, right, of deliverables. And so I don't think that they're wrong. I think these are good. I think if we need to add more explanation of what, say, number 1 is, you know, then maybe that's where maybe it's just a recommendation that's where we go rather than to dismantle these, is to work on these to add the information that we want to make sure that they're not just doing number 1. you know, that they're not just putting all their efforts into, you know, the data. So and it could say in other existing sources of data, you know, I don't know, but I think you have a really good framework here, the deliverables.
Do we want to break these down a little bit further at all within, say, number 1 or number 2 or number 3? I like how Carly had put it with that phased approach. Phase 1 being the data collection component, the development of the report. Phase 2 being using those numbers to determine where you're going to focus your efforts, or in this case, if it's a 58 county review, looking at the areas within that county that are you know, where they're doing well and where they may need some additional help. Phase 3 would be, if I'm looking at this right, well, we have the identifications of challenges and barriers that may exist. I'm looking at number 3 on the list. And then 4, highlighting some particularly noteworthy programs.
Would those be 4 phases or 3? Would phase 1 be like number 1 and number 2, right? You know, analyzing the data and looking at, you know, where disparities exist and develop a review of counties and assessment of, you know, what they're doing. So that might be one, you know, and then maybe the second part would be identify some of the challenges and barriers to what's going on. And that could also be with highlighting projects. And then the third part would be providing a framework to help counties, you know, because you're taking in all of that information, you know, so you're looking at the data and then you're kind of pulling out what are some of the big challenges and what are some of the things that are working really well. And then here's a framework that would help folks, you know, in the future. That's maybe just some suggestions of breaking it out.
Yeah, I'm writing as you're talking to this. So, is there any other input while I continue writing here? So
I know I'm still stuck on this. A detailed review of each county seems challenging. Are we anticipating like a survey and then a follow-up? Because I'm thinking that we mean a detailed review of a sample of counties to provide a narrative on, you know, what are the causes of the disparities, the significant contributors, and what are the best practices that allow us to overcome them and implement a more fair and just system.
Exactly. Exactly what you said. Sorry, I don't know your name, Kenny. Yeah, that's exactly. So, and again, I'm really sorry that I was a bit late, but are all these bullets under C? These are, we can edit these, right?
Part of the recommendation that the SACJJDP made. So these are, I think Tim broke out that full recommendation that was passed at the SACJJDP and put in like bullets, you know.
Yeah, so I think everybody's getting tripped up on that each county because there's no way that we could dive into each county. So we just have to we need to kind of strike that. I think maybe where some of the confusion occurred there is that we do have data for each county, right? So that's easy, right? A lot of that is already available. It's just how you want to present it and how you want to interpret it will be up to the consultant, right? And then based on that, it's the assessment, it's deciding, okay, which counties are we going to dive into that we then get at through number 3 and 4, right? Barriers, challenges, successes.
Actually,
and then providing, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then ultimately, I think the culmination of the report is about recommendations, right? That framework to help counties, that's really about the recommendations based on what was learned from the quantitative data, as well as diving into what's going on in the counties.
Actually, the recommendation from SACJJDP says a detailed review of each county. So that is a directive to this. And again, we're not looking, I mean, we have data that has information. That part should not take the consultant a lot of time to do the data. It's there, it exists in terms of where disparities. But the recommendation was that we develop a detailed review of each county, including county interventions. So that are resulting in the reduction of racial and ethnic disparities and the identification of challenges and barriers. I mean, that's why there's a lot of this money going into this, right? Because we're asking that we at least take a look, and it could be done, you know, again, we're not going to prescribe for the consultant how they do this. It could be done in different ways. I think, as Tracy said, they could do a survey to the counties that say, what are you doing, you know? It could be some interviews with some of them. It's up to the consultant to propose to us what their method is of accomplishing this, right? They may say, we're going to tell all the counties to turn in the survey, and we're going to go and we're going to, 10% of them, we're going to actually do interviews and review. That's they have to respond to the proposal, but that is the requirement that SACJJDP set.
Okay, so perhaps then it is really that more of a three-phased approach, which is probably what you were already saying. And I apologize for getting off on that each county piece, because obviously I was part of those discussions, but I think sometimes it comes down to just the semantics and what, you know, how it ends up getting written up. But you know, it's possible, like you were saying, to do like a very brief survey of just what each county is doing, so it is a lower lift, because I think ultimately it's that third piece of like diving into some specific counties, the noteworthy ones, right? We really need to learn from who's doing this well.
Just to elaborate a little bit, when we're saying county, that is an entity separate from cities, and every city inside a county has different data, has different types of assessments, has different type of interventions. Some of them are going to be happy to participate. Some of them are not going to participate. They enter their information into DOJ in different fashions. So when you look at a county as large as my county, I mean, and again, I'm not saying this isn't a great idea, but how you actually get there, it's not as simple as saying the county needs to do an assessment, because the county of San Bernardino would be willing to do an assessment, and I could show you what's happening in the probation department, but I can't tell you how every city, how they make their decisions on arrests or interventions, and that's all before it hits the county level, all the city level. It's just another, it is certainly one of your barriers listed in number 3.
That's a really, really, really good point. You know, I do know that all city police departments are required to report to the FCC any arrests and detentions. So I don't know how we incorporate that data, because that is an excellent point, that we were focusing here on county, like as in county probation, or, you know, the county who is the repository, but really, really good point.
That's what I was going to ask you, Tracy Reese, since you do work with the county, what a heavy lift that may look like. Because I'm just thinking 58 counties, and that's a lot of counties, and then municipalities and institutions within all of those counties may be quite difficult to do it for all 58. And back to your to the funding, that may just suck up all the funding. So something to think about, because as a consultant, I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to have to go and do basically a process eval of all these institutions. That may be all gone, and there will be no money really for implementation.
And again, unfortunately, just to be realistic about this, every city, we have no authority. Everyone has to report their arrest and stuff, you know, to the DOJ or wherever it goes. But for example, some of the agencies in my county would not participate, and I have absolutely no authority to make them participate. And so again, all arrests and things of that nature are recorded, but how timely someone does it, how truthful what's sent in. But aside from that, like I know there are some police departments in my county that have excellent intervention programs. They're forward thinking and they understand this as a problem and want to resolve it. And there are some that it's not that high on their list of priorities. All within my same county.
Right. And so that is another excellent point, because not every county is required to do this. And so when we think of 58 counties, it seems overwhelming, and then the cities within the county. But again, we don't have any hammer to make them do this, right? And so if only 10 counties participate, are willing to participate, then that looks different to the consultant's workload than all 58, right? So I think, again, we don't want to prescribe for them how to do it, but there are some ways that they could kind of cull through this, you know, by sending out that ask to everyone and seeing who's going to respond, and then kind of going further. I'm thinking that anyone who's going to apply for this has worked in these circles before, and will, you know, probably realize where they might be able to get some good information, and where, you know, no matter how much they ask, it's not going to happen, and so they kind of move to the next level. I'm hoping that that's what we get.
Yeah, I don't know how exactly we can drop these things, but I guess I would just want to know from the experts, like, what can you give us if we really hold you to the 58 counties, and what could you give us in an alternative universe with the sample, and try to have some flexibility when awarding it to decide on what we think will actually get us the information that we're wanting to inform the second phase of the project, which would be funding some places to actually implement, you know, new interventions. And I don't know if there's a way to say that.
Well, it's through the RFP. So we put out what we want, and then they reply to us on what they can deliver, right? And then in that, you know, maybe nobody replies that they can do this in a way, you know, what, you know, like every single county is going to be evaluated. They reply and say, this is our process that we're going to use to be able to get you the information. And then we compare that with the 1 or 2 bids or 3 bids that we get, or maybe it's just one, right? And then if nobody bids, then you're right, Tracy, we're going to need to go back and say, okay, what do we need to modify here? But I'm afraid that we're diving into implementation, and that's more for the bidder to tell us what they can and can't do. But we should have an ask. This is all important information that we'd love to have, right? I mean, we want to know what's happening everywhere. We've been asking to get a better sense, and we've been wanting to hear this for a long time. So that's why we invested money that we haven't before. It was always just for demonstration projects. And now we're saying, wait, let's give us an analysis, give us so that we can invest wisely. And so I guess I would just say, I think it's important for us to ask, and then let them tell us that they cannot meet that ask, or what they can do within that, within the resources. I hope that kind of makes
sense there. That's a really good approach. I like that. Yeah, I'm just throwing my 2 cents in. As far as writing this up, and as far as developing the scope of work, yeah, putting it on there, so to speak, saying, you know, we need to identify challenges and barriers. Please provide, in response to this RFP, what that would look like. Or yeah, but we may need to add some more teeth to that as we go along, but it's a good starting point.
This is Dan. Last meeting, Moises said that he is impressed with the amount of data that we have. And so the question is, and Rachel said, the data is the data, we have what we have. But if the whole point of number 2 is that the recommendation we're going to make is going to each county, and each county has different data, then it seems one of our recommendations should be everybody should standardize their data. And so a question I have is, like, what kind of data do all the counties have that we can then assess and determine that you're doing a good job, or you're doing a poor job, which seems to be what we're supposed to be doing, is creating some kind of standard. And I guess my question is there a standard that exists that we can then measure everybody else against, saying, you guys are great, you guys blow? I mean, and then say, this, our recommendation is for you to get your acts together and talk to each other, which seems to be what we're supposed to be doing. And so I guess the question I have is like, who is doing it well? And then who do we compare it to that who is not doing it well? And does that information exist?
Yeah, Dan, currently,
Super good question.
yeah, Dan, currently there, as Tracy had mentioned, Tracy Reese had mentioned, there currently is a data reporting mechanism within the state of California from the cities and counties to the California DOJ. Again, as discussed in our last meeting, there are issues at times where, you know, what's reported, and then when they see the data in front of them, they say, well, that's not what the reality is. You know, it's county city issue. But there is an actual standard, and that data is actually housed with our California Department of Justice and their research department.
And is that the RRI that Tracy was talking about, or is that something else?
Well, they have the base data. They'd actually developed those tables for the RRI for us out of the base data. So one of the things we are actually looking at, we actually have our research department here on this call, is that when the report is developed, we would look at what the data elements would be required to actually generate that report, and have that report updated on an annual basis once the previous year's data is available. And then we would go through the process as BSCC to actually request to have that data, you know, doing the data request to the DOJ to bring that data to the BSCC to actually populate our tables within that report on an annual basis, so we can begin trend analysis, et cetera. So part of it is, in this project, is to determine those data points and those data elements, and then from there we would make the request to the DOJ to actually get that base data, potentially even going back. But that would be a research question. So yes, does that answer your question, Dan?
You know, I'm kind of targeting, if we're looking to give a February deliverable of all this information, and you're talking about creating a survey now to distribute it, get it back, and analyze it, that seems,
Dan,
what are you talking about?
Real quick, our February deliverable is just reporting the progress of where we are on this project. It's not a final date that this has to be done.
You know, to Dan's point, this consultant could create recommendations that the SACJJDP could then take and also recommend to the governor, to the BSCC, that there be different reporting mechanisms, and, you know, standardized, because we've always had this issue about reporting, and it's always been like, what can we mandate that the counties report versus what we can ask them that they report. So I think, you know, part of what we're doing here is looking at, as they tell us about the data that exists and the data that should exist and how they collect that data. You know, there's opportunity for them to possibly give us some recommendations, you know, when we talk about the framework, you know, is that maybe we're collecting all this data, but we're not collecting what's really important. And so hopefully they can give us some insight on that. I know it's a big lift to mandate that the counties do anything. I know the BSCC doesn't want, whenever the state tells the county to do something, they have to pay for it, right? But you know, we should at least let the consultants tell us if there's something that they could be doing. Maybe they would want to do it, and it would give them, you know, more information.
Yeah, I know that as a consultant, whenever I provide a report, I always have a section on the limitations of the data. There's always limitations when you work with community on data, and I always provide some recommendations on how to improve it, whether it's listened to or not. That'd be nice to always have. But then there's always the human factor of, am I really gonna ask the race, ethnicity of this person? Am I really gonna document everything that I'm doing? And so that's always the issue with some of that data, Dan. So as was said earlier, some institutions, they're good at it, man. They push that data, they train people how to input that data in their reports. The practitioner knows what to put in. Other institutions are not so much into that. And so that's where the disparities, a lot of times, disparities in data collection often happens. And for me, that's just part of working community. You use your data, what you got, always try to improve, but that data has to give you some guidance to be able to do something. If not, you're just going to be stuck.
Response on that? Okay, so recap here, looking at the phases that we have. Phase 1, the data report. 2, what is driving the numbers. 3, identify challenges and barriers. 4, what is working. And then 5, this next part, the development of a framework. What are your thoughts on that? And by thoughts, I mean, what would we be putting out to in an RFP that we would want responded to?
Maybe I read that as kind of the recommendations. So the lessons learned, framing all of them so that counties can be more effective, right? If I was a consultant, like you said, you know, if I read that sentence, that's what I would probably think of.
That's how I would read it as well.
Are we okay with that, Tim?
Yeah, sorry, I was writing. I had it on mute while I was writing it in. Taking notes as we go here. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's good. So, so any other deliverables? I'm looking at item number 7 here. Any other deliverables that we would want beyond this 5-phase approach? Obviously, within each one, we have specific components, you know, a report, etc. A methodology that we would want from them, you know, going back. So I got notes on all that. I just want to make sure. And then I think E would happen. I have, you know, we just discussed D. I think E would happen while we were going through this. So give me your thoughts on this. While we get into the project phase, I'm expecting that we're going to have continued meetings with the consultants where they bring us, you know, questions that we would be able to steer. We would have some sort of a steering committee that would assist. So I think we can answer that in that process. I do have a couple other things to discuss. Before we get to F, I think we'll do that last. One question that I would like to have answered now, I think, is let's move to I. What criteria do we want this consultant to have? Obviously, we're taking a look at, you know, we want them to have some sort of a background and knowledge on racial and ethnic disparity, probably statewide, potentially nationwide. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree. You know, they need to have some experience. I mean, good experience, you know, working in this arena. It's not something for a new consultant that's never done this to really dive into. So prior experience, you know,
and we can actually
around these issues, prior experience.
We can actually frame this in a way in the RFP where you say, ask them to actually provide us a detail of their experience, but is there any specific areas we would want them into detail. One of them, I'm sure, would be data analysis. You know, history working with racial and ethnic disparities. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, and similar projects, especially within California, so that they demonstrate an understanding of our, you know, framework and jurisdictional relationships and all of that.
So I think that that's important that they understand the work in California, because they'll have to connect with all those 58 counties, you know. So understanding what they're getting into is important.
Any others? Okay, so we do have the dividing line of the 300,000 and the 200. I kind of work backwards here. So looking at H, based off of our discussion, how would you want to have this put out in an RFP? Do we want to cap how much money is to be allocated for this project lower than the 300,000? Are we, you know, how would we want this to be displayed? You know, up to 300,000? What are your thoughts?
Can you tell us what is the SACJJB, what's the wording that the SACJJB allocated? Up to $300,000 for an analysis? Is that what was said?
Up to 300,000 for the contract portion, and then 200,000 for local interventions or demonstrations. Obviously, we could go less on the 300,000 if you deem that would be something you'd want to do and have more allocated towards the demonstration portion. But maybe 300,000 is the target. I just, if we think it's going to be far less, one thing I want to make sure that everybody understands that when we put this out, there are federal contracting limits within Title II. I think it comes to a max of $650 per day, or something like $83.50 an hour. So in this, we're going to have to, it's going to have to be written up in a way that that their hourly rate is not above the federal contracting limit for consultants. So so just want to put that out there, but I don't think at this point we would.
And that's all in the contract.
Yeah, and I don't think at this point we'd be able to put the amount of hours that it's going to take for each of these phases. We want them to come back with their proposal and tell us what they expect, but they're going to want to have some sort of a cap, you know, to a maximum of 300,000, or if you guys, is that a good number? Are you guys okay with that? In keeping with the.
I'm personally okay with that, given that, you know, the group is feeling that this is a lot of work, but want to hear what the group has to say. And just really quick, all of these caveats in terms of requirements with federal hourly rates, all of that is in there, so they know that when they bid for it, that they've got to, you know, cap their people's hourly rates at whatever is federally approved, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the federal cap is $650 a day for an 8-hour day, and an hourly rate, or an hourly rate of I think it's $83.51 an hour is the federal cap for a consultant.
Yes, a lot of them already know that.
Well, we may not. If we get some
Anybody...
state consultant, you know, that doesn't deal with the federal contract, they may not know. So we will put it out there in the RFP. So I think we answered a question that we should up to the 300,000.
That amount, how do other folks feel about the amount? Do you feel that it's too much? Would you want to limit it to less? I mean, it doesn't have to mean that they apply for the whole amount, just it usually can say up to this amount of money is available. And it can also say any funds remaining from this project will be allocated to demonstration projects, so that folks would know, you know, if they if they didn't need all the money, that they could apply for 250, and it's not just going to go in the air, but it's going into something that they probably would be committed to doing as well. But I'm okay with that amount. It's up to, what does the rest of the group feel?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And, it's good to know what we can get for the amount that the SACJJB thought was appropriate for this phase. And, then we have an idea of, as you said, you don't have to ask for the full amount, but if people know what the ceiling is, then they can propose up to that, and we can see what it would allow us to get in terms of analysis and recommendations.
So one more question on that front. Would we want to add a component of technical assistance to this for the demonstration project portion, or would we want to handle that separately?
Explain what you mean.
Well, if someone's implementing,
I think I know what you mean, but
yeah, if someone's implementing part of the framework, from the lessons learned, et cetera, if they had, if this organization has specific expertise on implementation, would we want them to be able to be a resource to that entity that's implementing, or something that we do as staff already? I don't know if it's necessarily important. I think we have enough expertise on our SACJJB and this REB subcommittee to handle it, but there may be potentially where we want them to have a little bit of money set aside to be able to answer some questions regarding how they got from A to B on the number of these phases for that subcontractor who's doing implementation. So just a thought, a requirement, bring that out there. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know, because I don't know, because we don't have that piece of it yet, right? So when we talk about the implementation piece, it could be that the SACJJB puts more money than the 200,000 allocated, and then determines that in addition to the money we put out for that we want to put out a contract for technical assistance, and have entities help them with to be successful. But I don't know if that's expanding the scope of what we've been asked to do here. I agree, it would be great if to look at the whole thing, but we don't know exactly who the entity will be, right?
Rachel, this is Ricardo. I do worry a little bit about how much we're asking a potential consultant / contractor to do. I mean, they need to check several boxes, and while I'm extremely hopeful that the committee and the SACJJB will get back a final product that you're pleased with, I certainly don't want to assume that they're skilled also in providing TA. And so I think I would err with you. I do appreciate Tim raising the question because it's helpful to think it through. But I would love for folks to have a chance to just react to whatever that product is, and then determine if you would want to kind of continue that relationship.
I think that is wise. Just given that we're already asking them to do a lot, it makes a lot of sense to let that group do this work and then see if they're into it for the next phase, depending on what SACJJB decides.
Agreed. Okay, so I think we have quite a bit of information here to work off of. I think I can put something together that we could get together and mull over at the next meeting, something that would be concrete on paper that we could wordsmith and make adjustments to. I want to refer you to item F on the agenda real quick here. At this point, the RFP completion is the biggest part. Before we get off this call, I hope we can set the next meeting date where we could actually take a look at that example. There are going to be a couple of components here, and the timing is somewhat unknown in that we're going to have, so I don't think at this point we would be able to put dates on all of this, but these are some of the dates we're going to have to put down as far as a calendar here. We do definitely have to have the RFP completion. It's then going to have to go to the SACJJB for review. We do have a series of meetings a series of meetings this year in September, October, and November, I would think that we could get this to one of those meetings for sure. And then from there, I have if needed here, but we are, but potentially, and Aaron's going to look into this for us, our chief counsel, on whether we do need to bring this to the board. It is possible that there is some delegated authority here, so we just need his take on that. If it does need to go before the board, Ricardo, help me out. I know we have potentially a board meeting in November and also one in February. I believe would be a couple of the potential dates for the board. And then once the board approves, we would do the RFP release the next day. So we'll have to determine along that path on this next meeting how long we would want that RFP out. Then we would have to go through a proposal review. We do need to determine the length of the contract, which would then give us a project completion date. So we do have a little bit of work to do on this front. I don't think until we get that RFP completion component or portion, we wouldn't be able to fully put all these dates on paper at this point. So, so at this point, unless there's any other questions, we can take a look at the calendar for our next meeting to review a draft of the scope of work.
And
Before you move on, can I just ask a clarifying question? I apologize. Does the committee anticipate, and I know that Dan had started to raise this question a little bit later on, but just in terms of just long-term planning, that this is something that will be released late next year, 2022, just even super roughly, just so that internally we can just kind of think through just workloads. Does the committee even have a rough sense of when they would want this released?
Can I follow up on that, Ricardo?
Of course, please, yes.
Because what I was going to ask is, can we get some timeframes, like how long is all of this going to take, so that we have a realistic idea of when the soonest we can get this out? So I think we're way behind and we want this out yesterday, right? But we need to know like what your workload is going to be in terms of, and all the steps that it needs to go through for approvals. So could we get staff to work through these things? Like, we know that you need a SACJJDP meeting, and there's one pretty soon, but there, but you might not have the RFP ready for us. So when would we have different points so that that gives us a sense of dates that we have to work to make sure that we're meeting the timelines versus kind of leaving it open-ended. But I would say if we can move quickly, because I know that we've been wanting to do this for a while.
Tim, did you want to respond at least to the first part about when we would have a potential draft for folks to react to?
Potential draft, I'm looking at the calendar here, what's coming up with the holiday. Potential draft, it would probably take me a good 3 weeks after going back and forth with both staff and our chair. Let's see. Holiday, I would think we could meet again anytime after September 14th, knowing that there is a SACJJDP meeting on the 17th. I think that's a little bit aggressive to get something before then by then. Yeah, I think.
So let's say got it by September, then there's also a SACJJDP meeting in October, right, that we're thinking about. So it could possibly go to SACJJDP by October?
Yeah, October 29th would be very realistic. Rachel Cherios, I think the 17th is a little bit aggressive. I think that October 29th is very realistic to have it before the SACJJDP.
Okay. So if we say that we want this to SACJJDP no later than the October meeting, then when would the board, when's the next meeting after SACJJDP reviews? If this has to go to the board, when would that be?
November 19th.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get clarity on if it's needed well in advance of that, obviously.
So then now we're putting some dates. And so after the board votes on it, then it could be released in late November, which is hard during holidays, but it could be released in November. with a due date of, usually you give 30 to 60 days? What do you usually give?
With a holiday,
Our RFPs, we typically do a minimum of 8 weeks, just as a heads up.
So if you did it late November, it would be due by maybe mid to late January? And then once the proposal came in, we would schedule, go ahead.
yeah, there would be holidays in there too we would have to consider. So it could be early February.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of work through it, and then we can see times, because it could be possible that it doesn't need the board's review, right? And then after SACJAB approves it in October, that it could be released in early November. So let's kind of keep late January, and then proposal review. This committee would want to review those proposals, right, and rate them, and that would probably be February, and hopefully awards made February, and then you would develop your contract terms. I mean, that's kind of aggressive, but I think we should try and set ourselves, an aggressive time frame so that it pushes us to get it done.
Absolutely.
What does everyone think? And I think in there, Tim, we would have a SACJAB meeting somewhere in February to be able to, or March, to be able to approve the recommendation of the RFP.
Yes. Well, the February would be the decision of the contractor, correct?
Mm-hmm. February, I would think we would try to go for February.
Yep. That would fit within our SACJAB.
How does everyone feel about that? Do you feel we could do that in the time frame listed there?
I'm very comfortable with that on my end, from staff.
I think it sounds pretty reasonable.
If you have to do the work and you think you can do it, well then sure.
And if there's delays, you would let us know. And if it goes quicker, we would just, we schedule in some meetings to kind of make sure that we have the ability to review. But it sounds like a reasonable time frame, I think.
Would this group like to schedule a meeting? Maybe we could do it just after the next SACJAB meeting, sometime between around the week of the 21st or the 28th. I'd like to get the draft in there with a little bit of time before the SACJAB meeting, so that if we do need to come back again, we can do that. I don't think we should wait till the end of October to finally approve it before it goes to SACJAB. We need to give them 10 days or so to review it as well prior to the meeting. So I'm thinking we could meet sometime the week of the 1st or the 28th of September, if you guys are available calendar-wise. And we could schedule it as a 2-hour meeting. I mean, we've done an hour and a half and it's completed quite a bit of work today. I think for the review portion, we could complete it in under 2 hours. Anybody have any preference on any of the days between the 21st and the 2nd of October?
So what were the 2 days that you just gave? Sorry.
I was giving a beginning to end date. I'm thinking any time between the September 21st and October 2nd, over that 2-week period, looking for availability.
I'm available Mondays and Tuesdays. Those just work out the best for me.
The 22nd or 29th?
Days of the week. So any Monday or Tuesday.
Carly, how's your schedule?
I was just throwing it in the chat. That's fine with me, except Tuesday, I can't 1 to 3. So, but open Monday or Tuesday morning.
Okay.
The 21st or the 22nd is fine with me.
I'm free the 21st and the 22nd, but only in the mornings.
So how about the 22nd from?
You can do Tuesday.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I can do that Tuesday morning.
So I'm looking at the 22nd from 10 to 12, or would you like? The 9 seemed to be a little difficult.
I would. Is it possible to do earlier?
Like how much
I
earlier?
would agree. If we could do, even a half hour earlier, I mean, 9 would be great, but if 9 doesn't work, maybe 9:30 at least to 10 to 11:30.
I'm fine. Yeah.
I'm
You good?
very open.
Sorry, Carly, I think I stepped on
That's
you.
fine.
Okay, so let's do September 22nd from 9:30 to 11:30. I'll send out the notice and we'll have a document in your hands, hopefully to review with enough time ahead of the meeting where you're able to weigh in with notes. Are we good for today, Chair?
That sounds great. And Tim, will you be connecting with the members who weren't able to be on to kind of give them a recap so that you know they understand and maybe they have some notes or input as well?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments regarding the process or any other thoughts? If not, I'll turn it back to the.
Everyone, I mean, yeah, great work, everyone, and you didn't get a chance to formally meet Carly, but she's an amazing addition, and Dr. BJ wasn't able to be here, but I think you would also agree that he, you know, will is a good addition, and everyone appreciate your, you know, comments and continued work on this.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you next month.
All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachel, do you want to